This is our chapter project for Chapter 9. In this chapter, we've learned how layers can be used to manage the visual display features of a drawing. In this chapter project, we're going to create a new template file with a set of layers that we're going to use for a future project. So that's really important. We're starting off the first chapter project that we're going to be using later on. So make sure you do it right, or else you're going to pay for it later on. I'm joking with you, giving you a hard time. I've included a copy of this file that we're going to create in here. So when you make yours, you can open up the one I've done so that you can compare it. And I'll do that with a lot of the other chapter projects from this point on. So if you make a mistake, that's okay. Go back, rewatch this video, and redo it and see what happens. So to start off, we need to make a new file. We're going to open up a DWT file that comes with Autocad. So you should have it. It should be working okay for you. If not, I'll make sure that it's included in this chapter file so that you can work with it. So let's type in new. Click open, and that will open up your select template window. Now we want to use the tutorial-iarc.dwt file. Now this is an architectural file because we're going to be making an architectural drawing for our final project. And this is going to be the base file that we're going to start with. Well, we're going to set it up. So we're making a new drawing. We're going to start with this template file and click open. This will bring you to a paper space tab called D-size. It's an architectural D-size drawing. It has a pretty generic title block in here already, and it has a viewport set up and some other layers and styles and things set up that we're going to need. So you can just stay right in here. What's the first thing you do when you start a new file? That's right, save. So if you want to make a chapter folder to save your drawings in, you can. That's fantastic. Or if you're saving everything to your Autodesk 360 cloud, then that's a great idea too, maybe even better. Click save. Put it wherever you're going to want to put it, on your Autodesk 360 cloud, some other folder somewhere, a thumb drive, jump drive type thing or whatever. But I'm going to save it right here so that you guys will be able to have it when you get the videos. I'm going to name the file project template. And I'm not going to make it a DWT file because it really isn't in this case. This is going to be the start of our project that we're going to use. But feel free to save it as a DWT file so that you can make a new file later on from it. And this can be the basis of your template files from now on. Click save, and here you go. So now we see that it's saved. And what we're going to do is be able to set up some layers. So type in LA for Layer Manager. Now this template file already has several layers already built into it for us. So that's fantastic. But me, I'm kind of picky. I don't like all of these. Some of them I'm going to want you to change, and I'm going to need you to create some new layers because we have other needs for what we're going to be drawing that aren't addressed here. Now there are a lot of different standards and conventions for creating layers. If you work in the United States, here we have something called the NCS, or the National CAD Standards. And that's just one of many. So you can follow along with what I'm going to do here. You can make your own, but I suggest you follow along for the case of the tutorials for what we're doing. The important part in naming layers is that you and your company create a standard so that when you work together, you know what's what. It's all about organizing and managing and working together. So when you create a system, in whatever system that is, as long as you're all working with that same system, you can all work together much more easily. What we're going to do is create a couple of layers and change some. Now there's one in here called dimensions. It's right here. Let's change that one. We're going to change the color. I don't want it to be red. We're going to use green. Click OK. Now that one's green. Now there's a wall layer here, but I want it to be named something different. So you can right click on this and select rename layer, or you can just press the F2 button. Click in the box, and we'll keep it A-walls, but call it -exterior. Press enter. Now we have a new layer called A-walls-exterior. Now I also want to make another one, a brand new one, and we want it to look a lot like this. We're going to call it A-walls-hatch. One difference though is we're going to change the color. So pick on the color, and we're going to use color 8, sort of a grayish faded back color a little bit. Now I want an interior wall layer. All right, so let's make another new one. Let's pick this line for the exterior because we're going to make it very similar to it. Type in A-wall-interior. And this time we're going to make the color blue. Now there's a door layer. I want that color to be yellow. I need a window layer, which we have, and I want to change that to color 30. So just come down here and type in 30. When you know what the number is, it's much easier to type it in than to move around and try to find exactly where color 30 is. Well, there it is right there. Click OK. Now I want a chair layer. And I want that color to be magenta, and I want it to be a continuous line type. So this text layer right here matches that perfectly. So pick it and now select New. Type in chair, enter, and that one's done, nice and easy. Now we need a text layer, which we have, and I want that color to be white, which is number 7. Now you can type in here number 7, or you can type in the color white, and it'll be the same thing. Now we need 2 more layers, a plant layer and a footing layer. The plant layer is going to be red and continuous. We don't have one of those, so call it plant. It's continuous, and I want it to be red. Click OK. And one more layer to create a footing layer. This layer will have our footing on it for our building. And I want that one to be the color 8. And I want a different line type. I don't want it to be continuous. I want it to be hidden. We don't have hidden on here, so hit load. You can hit the letter H and it will take you down to the line types that start with the letter H. So pick hidden, click OK. Now it's an option for us, and we select hidden. Now one last thing is viewport. I want to change the viewport layer to a no print layer, which is right here. Click that one, and now we're set. So now we have several layers that are in our file that we're going to be able to use, and then we've tweaked them a little bit and added some more to it. Now when you're done with this, you can close the layer manager or not, but make sure you save your work, because I would hate for you to have to go through all of that again. Congratulations, you just started your work on your final project. What is a drawing without dimensions? Just a bunch of lines, I guess, but dimensioning a drawing properly is essential. There are many tools in Autocad to help us annotate our drawings. Dimensioning is the process of adding measurement annotation to a drawing. Let's open up the dimensions example drawing. You can create dimensions for a variety of object types in many orientations. Linear dimensions can be horizontal, vertical, aligned, rotated, a baseline, or a continued dimension, which is a chained dimension. Dimensions can be associative, non-associative, or exploded. Associative dimensions adjust to changes in the geometric objects that they measure. I recommend that you always use associated dimensions, especially if you are placing your dimensions in paper space. I'll show you some examples here. These dimensions here that I'm selecting have been done in paper space. Dimension associativity defines the relationship between your objects and the dimension object. There are 3 types of associativity between geometric objects and dimensions. Now, this gets kind of technical here, and I apologize for that, but it's important to know the difference, because when you run into drawings that aren't using these features, it can be difficult to work with dimensions. Associative dimensions automatically adjust their locations, their orientations, and measurement values when the geometric objects associated with them are modified. So your dimension will follow the line. Dimensions in a layout may be associated to objects in model space. The dim associate system variable DIMAGEATTACH should be set to 2. There are 3 settings for this system variable: 0, which is off, 1, and 2. When it's set to 2, the dimensions will follow the line work. So if you shorten a line, your dimension will move accordingly and will automatically be updated. A non-associative dimension, which is set to 1, will not change when the geometric objects are modified. And if it's set to 0, then it's an exploded dimension. That means that it's just a collection of separate objects, like a line or text, a block for the arrowhead, etc. It's not a dimension object. Therefore, if you want to edit that dimension, you have to delete each individual piece and recreate it, or move each piece as if it were line work. Dimensions have several distinct elements to them. They have their text, dimension lines, arrowheads, and extension lines. All of these can be controlled, defined, and altered through the dimension styles or through the properties manager. Let's go to this No Dim tab. Just click on it. It's the same line work as in the Dimension tab here and in the Styles tab here, only there are no dimensions. Creating a dimension is actually very simple. There are several ways where you can get to the different dimensions. If you're on the Home tab in the ribbon, you can go to the Annotation panel. The Annotation panel is sort of a short and condensed version of the Annotate tab. You can create dimensions right here. Click on the flyout arrow, and you have a linear dimension, which will lock the dimension in a horizontal or vertical orientation. Essentially, it will give you your X or Y distance. The aligned dimension will give you the distance between 2 points, regardless of its rotation or angle. The angular dimension will give you the angle of your objects. You can do an arc length, a radius, the diameter, an ordinate point, and you can jog your dimension as well, especially on a radius. So in order to create any of these, just pick one. We'll start with the aligned. Now, when you dimension, you want to make sure you're using your O-snaps, especially if you're dimensioning in paper space. So turn on your O-snaps, or you can always type in endpoint. Let's pick down here. Type in end again. Click up here. And there you go. This is 100 feet long. This is a pretty big piece of steel or wood or something here. But that's okay. The units really right now are not as important. We'll go over how to set units and dimensions later. But that's it. You pick 2 points. Pick another point and your second, and then you pick your point where you want your dimension to be shown. It's really that simple. Now let's try a radius. You can only put a radius or a diameter on an arc or a circle. Obviously, a line doesn't have a radius. So you just pick. And while you're putting your dimensions in, you can use your scroll wheel on your mouse to zoom in or out. Click and hold it to pan around. And just place your dimension wherever you want it to be. And that's it. Dimensions are quite simple to put in once you have everything set up the way you want them. You start your dimension command, pick your first point, pick your second point, and then pick your location. Editing dimensions, though, can be a bit tricky. If you want to edit text, you can either type in ED, press enter, and then select your text. Press escape to get out, or you can double click the dimension. Of course, here I missed and went to paper space. If that happens, come down here to the bottom and click on this model button. If that model button isn't there, then scroll out and double click somewhere out here. And as you see, it can be tricky. That's okay. That's why we have the ED or edit command. Now to edit the text, you just type in whatever it is you want it to be. It works just like your text editor. You have a lot of different options up here, and you can even delete the text that is the actual dimension. When you're finished, just click outside of your text somewhere. If you want your dimension back, use the less than and then the greater than. Now you can see the actual dimension or the actual measured dimension is highlighted. That's how you'll know that someone just didn't type in the number, which you can do. It'll show up the same way here in your drawing, but when you're in the text editor, it will be highlighted, letting you know that someone just hasn't overridden the dimension. So that's it in a nutshell. We're going to look at different things in different ways and in more detail here in the next few sections. Just as the display features of objects are controlled by layers, dimension styles control the display features of dimensions. Dim styles also control various dimension settings. There are over 300 settings and system variables for dimensions. We won't touch all of them, thank goodness, but there are a lot that we will touch. Styles help you control and manage these dimensions. Let's open up the dimension example file again. Go to the Styles tab. That's right down here. Several dimensions here are using different styles. You can see that some of them have tick marks, some of them have smaller arrowheads, others are larger. Some text is large and red, others are green, there are no extension lines, etc. It's easy to change the style of a dimension. Just select the dimension and open up the Properties panel. Mine's already open, but you can press Ctrl+1 to toggle it on or off. When you come here, you can see a lot of the different properties of the dimension. It tells you the dimension type. This is a rotated dimension, which is just one of your linear dimensions. It gives you the general settings, just like any other object, your color, your layer, your line type, etc. The miscellaneous section here tells you if it's annotative or not, or if it's of what particular dimension style or dim style. Pick in the box and you'll see an arrow come up. You can pick the arrow again to get a list of possible dimension styles that are in your file. As you move across the list and highlight one without clicking, you get a preview of your dimension of what it's going to look like if you pick that style. Watch over here on my right. If we go to bold, that's what it looks like. Civil, which is the one we currently have set. No extensions, standard, or tick. You can tell that the civil is the one we have set because it shows the grips. So find the one you want and select it. And that's how you change the style. Very simple, very easy. If the dimension has been exploded, for example, like this one here, all it is a bunch of lines, piece of text, and in this case, a block for the tick mark. The dimension style no longer has any effect on this whatsoever. So I can't update it, not as easily as I can all of these. You see, I can select multiple dimension objects and go to the dimension style and update all of them to bold. That's why you use associative dimensions that we talked about in the last section. Once exploded, it's just a line. I can't do anything with it. If you go to the Annotate tab on the ribbon, you'll see here you have all of your annotation tools: text, dimensions, leaders, tables, markups, and annotation scales. The dimension panel is very similar to the annotate panel, except here it also has text in your dimensions, your leaders, etc. You have more tools available to you here, and we'll go over these in another section. But here you can click, and this will activate your dimension style. Right now we're set to civil. If we switch it to bold, any dimension that we create now will be used or drawn in the bold dimension style. So if we click here and activate the civil style and we dimension, you'll see that your dimensioning the exact same line, but the style looks different. We can change it again and dimension it one more time. and it looks different yet again. So that's what styles will do for you. Now, controlling them can be a bit tricky and a bit extensive, so we'll break it down and look at a few things here and there. But the styles are changed and created in the Dimension Style Manager, which you can get to by clicking on this little arrow. All of these annotation tools have this feature. This is the Dimension Style Manager. Here we have a list of the different dimension styles in our file, and you get a little preview. When you select one, you kind of see what it is. Has a description, tells you a little bit about it, why it's different, why it's unique. And here you can make some modifications to it, create a new one, etc. You can set one to current here as well. And it tells you right here what your current dimension style is. It's civil. If we want to change any of these, we click on the Modify button once we've selected the style we want to change. And you can see here there are several different tabs, and each tab has a lot of different settings. The nice thing is, though, you get a little preview of what it's going to look like. The Lines tab controls the way our dimension lines are displayed, or if they're even displayed at all. You can set it to a specific color, and I suggest you use either by block or by layer. Same thing with the line type or the line weight. These settings here will override anything that is controlled by your layer. So if your layer is set to a color of green, but you want it to be red, regardless of the layer settings, you can set it that way, and it shows here. You can do the same thing with your line type. You can make it hidden. And you can change the line weight, making it very thick or very thin. Now you have baseline spacing, which controls how far the dimension is away from the baseline. Now, I'm not going to go in detail of every little setting here because you really don't need to know everything right now, but you can always go through these and play with the settings. Now you can suppress your baselines or your dimension line, and it's done in halves. Why? I'm not really sure. I've always had to draw all of it. But there are times when you want to have a little dimension that looks like this, and you don't want to show the other side. So that's a special case. When it's okay to make a special case dimension style, that's why we have them. Now, if we look at the text, you're going to find out that the lines, symbols and arrows, and text will be the three main tabs where you'll make changes at. Now, your text style works similarly to the lines. You can pick your style of text, and text objects will have styles just like the dimensions have styles. And we'll talk about text styles in another section. But if you want, you can change that. You can set up a dimension text style so that your dimensions will be controlled by that text style. You can set the color here by layer or by block, or you can make it magenta if you'd like. You can set up a fill color. Now, the fill color puts an area behind the text. As you can see here, this makes it a little bit hard to read, but you can also use a background. Well, the background is kind of cool because what that does, it just blends in the background color, which is typically going to be like a white or a black. When you print out your drawing, it will match the background of the physical paper that you're on. Well, how does it do that? Well, it just doesn't print anything in that area. So that's cool because if you have line work underneath your text in your dimension, it will block out the line work and show only the text, clearing it up and keeping you from having to trim lines or mess around with your dimensions so you can see them. So that's something you may want to consider doing almost every time. You can set the text height, or the text height can be controlled by the text style, whatever you want to do. You can put a frame around it or not. You can align everything horizontally or with a dimension. You can center it. You can put it over an extension line. You can do a lot of different things. You'll just have to play with these settings until it comes out the way you want it to look. Now, the other one you're going to want to look at will be the primary units. This is very important because your dimensions will show somebody how big or how large that your item is that you're creating. You have the same type of settings that you do in your unit settings for your file. Now, these typically need to match, but it's up to you. You can do it however you need to. You can make them architectural, and you can change your precision on how precise your dimensions are going to be. You can change your fractional stacking. You can add a prefix. I'll put in my initials. You can add a suffix, and it will have, for architectural, a feet or inches, or if you're using decimal specifically, you're probably going to want to set this in if you're measuring in feet, or if you're dimensioning in millimeters, you want to set it to millimeters. When you make changes to your dimension style, and you've used that dimension style in your drawing, then those dimension styles will automatically be updated once you change their style. Now that's pretty cool, because then you can make quick changes to your entire drawing quickly. You can also use the match properties, type in MA, and pick your source, and then pick the target. And those styles will be applied to those other dimensions. In this section, we're going to take a look at some more advanced dimensioning tools. We're also going to take a look at some ways in which you can edit dimensions. First of all, let's open up a file that has some. Go to the dimension example file, open it up. Now here we don't have any dimensions. Let's create some very quickly. We'll just use the angular dimension. Pick your first point, and then pick a second. Place it. Now you can right-click to start the exact same command again. Pick your 2 points, and there you go. Okay, so you can see adding dimensions is actually quite simple. Just find the dimension type that you want to create, and pick your points. Now you can also dimension out in outer space, I guess. You don't have to pick anything. If you do, though, it's kind of pointless, but wherever you pick, that's where the dimension is going to go. Now you notice that this says 100 feet. Now if I were to click up here, in approximately the same distance, see, well, why is this 100 feet and this is 2.47 feet? Let's erase that to get it out of the way. Well, that's because when I used my O-snaps, it snapped to the line work that's in my model. Here, I'm snapping to nothing, so it's picking the paper size length. So when we print this out, this line is going to be about 2.5 inches long. So it's at a scale right now. And that's one thing to keep in mind. If your dimensions don't look right, maybe your O-snaps were turned off. Press F3 to toggle them off or on. You can type in OS to get to your drafting settings, and you can set up your running O-snaps however you want to. Now let's say you want to make changes to your dimensions. You can do that. Open up the Properties panel by pressing Ctrl and 1 at the same time. Now select one of the dimensions. Let's pick this one here. Now we can change the color of it. We can override it. Now if we do this though, remember everything you do here is going to override what's done in the Layer Manager. It's also going to override what's done in your dimension styles. So keep that in mind. We'll keep it at the civil style because I want to show you some things that are going to happen. Now here you can change your arrow types. Just select the box and pick the arrow. And there are a lot of different arrow types that you can pick. Let's go with a small dot. Now what's cool is I can set one arrow to be one thing, and I can set the other arrow to be something else. You may need that to happen. That's up to you. But let's make them both the small dots. We can even change the arrow size right here. Those are quite large. Let's go to 0.3. We can turn off or on a dimension line. Let's keep them both on in this case. So you can change almost anything here. You can turn off or on your extension lines. Now it has extension line 1 and extension line 2. How do you know the difference? Well, that's a great question. The first line you draw, or the first point you pick, will draw your first extension line. The second pick is the second extension line. So if I click this and I scroll back down to my extension lines, let's turn on extension line 1. That's right here. If I create another dimension over the same thing, But if we select this one, and let's turn off the same extension line, which was extension line 2. Now, as you can see, the red line is missing over here on the bottom left, and on the top right, the line is missing. Well, that's because we started here for the red dimension. This is 0.1 and then 0.2. For the green, we went 0.1 and then 0.2. So you have to keep that in mind. You can have dimensions and you've gone back and forth, and so that can make it difficult if you're trying to manage your extension lines. So just keep that in mind. It's not the end of the world by any means, but just keep that in mind if it's not behaving the way you think it should. Now, you can change your extension lines, you can change your arrowheads, and you can also change your text. Right here, it shows you the actual measurement of the object, which is 100 units. And I can override the text right here in this box. Instead of editing the text with a text editor, I can just come right here and I can tell it whatever I want. And I can press enter or click somewhere else and it overrides my measurement. Now, if I click back in here, hit a space, and if I put in my less than and greater than sign, it'll put in the actual dimension. So that's something you can do. Now, the fit of your dimension can be a little tricky here, and there are a lot of settings that you can try. This will force a dimension line. Sometimes if something's too narrow or too short, it won't draw it, and that's up to you. You can tell it the best fit, or you can tell it to push text arrows in and out. Let me show you with a smaller dimension. We have our smaller dimension, it fits right in here. But if we select it, let's change the style to bold. Now you can see here, because the text is bigger, it automatically pushed the text outside. If we select it, we can tell it to fit the text in a different way. As you move your cursor over this, it will give you a preview of what's going on. So this will move just the text out and leave the arrowhead and dimension line in, or it'll kick everything out. It's up to you. You can force the text inside regardless of what happens, or you can move the text and add a leader. So there are a lot of different ways to edit your text, especially with the properties palette. And you can come down here, change the fit, change your units and your alternate units and your tolerances. With dimensions, you can dimension in more than one type of unit. So you can do it in inches and in millimeters at the same time, or feet and meters, etc. You can also edit your dimensions with a text editor. You can type in ED or double click on the text itself. You have your text editor up here. You can change your style. You can make something bold. You can change the font right here. You can change the justification from a middle center to like a top left. You can put in columns, symbols, etc. You have all the same formatting tools in the dimension text as you do with regular text. So I can type a really long note in here if I want to. Now, it may not make any sense to do something like that, but you can. You can move around with your arrow keys. You can even press enter to do a carriage return, and you can do that as many times as you want. And there's your text. So you can do a lot in here. You can put a full note in your dimension object. And you probably saw earlier too that you can grip edit your dimension. So let's say I went to the wrong spot. I can grab a node point. All of your associated dimensions will have a node point. The node point is this little spot here, then there's a gap, and you have your extension line. That node is the point where you're dimensioning to. And I can change that. I can make it go anywhere I need to. And I can even put it right back. So that's a handy way to make a change to a dimension. Now, sometimes things don't work out the way they should with associative dimensions. you can change the line work and they don't go with it. That does happen from time to time, and it's very frustrating. Well, you just make your grip edit here and make your changes needed. You can grip edit right at the arrowheads to reposition the height of the text. If you grip edit the text, it'll move the text. And depending on the fit settings, the text will even move the dimension line up and down with it. Like in this example where we had the leader come out, you could do something like that. So all of those dimensions that we had in our properties palette are very important to know and to realize. Find the type of settings that you need to make the types of drawings that you want to make. And don't forget about the ribbon. You can access many different tools in the ribbon, and don't forget to right-click. Select your dimension and right-click. And you can get to some things right here, like dimension style. If you've created a dimension style and then you've edited your dimension, like we did here, you can select it, right-click, go to dimension style, and save as a new style. Just give it a name. Click OK. And now you'll see up here, you have a new style. That's a neat trick. And that's a really cool thing to do if you're working in someone else's drawing that you've never worked in before, and they've done some really weird stuff with their dimensions, and you just can't find the right style that they've used because they've, tweaked or customized those specific dimension objects. Just right-click, dimension style, and save as new style. You can also pick a style and apply it to that dimension that you've selected. If you go to Other, it'll give you a lot bigger list. So select your object, right-click. You can also change the precision of the dimension. So let's pick this one here. Right-click, precision, 1 decimal. So that's a really cool trick. You can take away all of your style overrides, and while that also removed our associativeness to the specific spots where we were at before. You can erase, and of course you can get to some of your basic editing operations that you have here available. Don't forget about the tools that you have in the ribbon right underneath here. Let's start on the right, the dimension jog line. Start the command, select a dimension, and then pick where you want that jog line to go. Now it went to the end. I snapped to it by accident. Let's make sure my O-snaps are turned off. I can pick this and I can slide it and move it to a different spot. Now I have some other tricks that I can do here with the jog line. I can select the jog line command, and you see here I have the option to remove it if I want. So I click remove, and now it's gone. Now this one here is the update. So if I've created some dimension styles and I've changed them, and for whatever reason I've done some overrides or something, I can select the dimension objects, press enter, and it will update them to go back to the dimension style settings. So that's one way to fix it. I can use the inspect command. It adds or removes different information. I can put these different tags and things in my dimensions. I can put in a label, etc. Click OK, and just follow the instructions on screen. And there you go. Now here I have a continue or a baseline dimension. If I hit continue, it will continue from the last dimension that I put in, and just lets me keep going and going and going, and there you go. Or if I pick the continue and I don't want to continue from that last one, but I want to say continue from this dimension here, I can type in the letter S or hit select. Pick the side that you want to start from and go from there. This is a real nice tool to quickly dimension something in a line and in a row, and it makes it nice and neat. Now you also have the baseline, and that works in a similar way. only instead of continuing in a row, it puts it above or below. And again, you can select the dimension that you want to work with. And that keeps going. This is a quick dimension. It quickly creates a series of dimensions from selected objects. But that only works in model space. So if I double click in here, where I can actually select the objects and press enter, and because I'm in a different scale, it looks really strange. But that's what happens. It will dimension, across the x-axis or the y-axis and quickly put the dimensions in there. Now I can adjust the space here between different dimension objects. I can tell it to automatically do it, or I can do it myself. Or here I can put in breaks. I add a dimension break to this line. I can pick it auto, manual, or remove. Pick auto, and it put a break right here. So those are some of the advanced tools that you can use to really tweak the visual display of your dimensions. I know there was a lot there, and a lot of them you're not going to use all the time, but they're there, and they will help you to make your drawing better. Dimensions in AutoCAD are very complicated because they have so many options to them. Keep it simple and make sure your dimension styles fit your needs. I want to look at a few key system variables and methods of dimensioning. The setting I'm talking about is the DIM Associate, or DIM ASSOC. Let's open up a file that has some dimensions in it. Let's look at the dimension example file again. The command I'm talking about, the DIM ASSOC, or DIM Associate, press enter. There are 3 settings for it, and we've mentioned this in an earlier section, but I want to go over it again because it's very important. Because you're going to find drawings that other people have used where they've changed this setting. It's my opinion that you should always have it set to 2. It's that simple to me because that gives you the most control and the easiest way to control everything. Right now in this file here, in this drawing, the DIM Associate system variable is set to 2. What that means is that when I dimension anything in here, in Paperspace, it will read the true dimension of the line work as drawn. I don't have to do anything special. I don't have to put a scale in the dimension style, which you can. You can change that. If you go to primary units, you can change the scale factor. Now, I can scale everything by 5 and click OK. Hit close, and as you see, it makes everything 5 times larger. Now, as you see, I can go in the opposite direction. And instead of having everything 5 times larger, I can make it 5 times smaller. That's a matter of scale. And you can do that if you're dimensioning in Paperspace. However, the problem is that style now only works at that scale. So if I'm drawing something at 1/4 inch to a foot, I have to set it up to a 48 scale. So I can't use that dimension style anywhere else. Let's keep it simple. Let's just keep the dimension style set at 1:1. And let's let AutoCAD do the scaling for me. If you have your Dimension Associate setting set to 0 and you create dimensions, they'll look like your style and they'll just draw everything else the way it needs to be. Except you see here, it's not scaling it properly. It's just drawing it to the scale in Paperspace. So you'll have to enter in the text the way you need it to. And it's not a dimension style. It's just a line. Several lines. The arrowhead is just a solid shape, and your text is just text. Now, the nice thing about this is that I can do whatever I want to this dimension, and it's very easy to edit it. But as you saw before, there were tons of ways and methods and tools available to us to change the display settings of our dimension. You really don't gain anything by doing this. So this is an old setting in a way when we didn't have as many controls visually of styles for our dimensions. So people would do this to be able to make them look the way they need to, but you lose control. You lose quick control. You lose convenience. Now, if your setting is turned to 1, it turns your dimensions into a block-like object that can be controlled by styles. But if this is the setting you use, then you need to modify your style scale like we showed you earlier. So you would have to dimension it accordingly by a scale because it won't be able to do that. I'll show you. Set it to 1. And now when we try to dimension this object, see, it's 5. It doesn't know what the scale of the viewport is. You have to tell it, or you have to change your style to match. The setting of 2, it sets your dimensions to the insertion points based on the model space objects that you select. It does several things for you. Most importantly, it measures the true distance that's involved, and it means that you can make one dimension style for the entire file regardless of the scales used. Before we had the setting of 2, we just had 0 and 1. We had to make tons of styles, one for each scale that we could possibly use in our drawing. This got redundant and difficult to manage. So the only reason to make a second style now in your file is to display it differently. As you can see here in our Styles tab. If you need some text bold, if you need something hidden, if you need a tick mark instead of an arrow, or whatever that case is, it's a strictly visual style difference, nothing else. And it makes things much more simpler. And a lot of times you're only going to have one dimension style in your file to begin with and to end with. If you delete an object in your drawing, for example, if I delete this line, I lose my associativity for my dimension. Though it's not going to really change any, but still it's no longer associated to that object. So if I replace it with another object, I'm just drawing something else, I can reassociate that dimension to a new object. You just use the reassociate command to reassociate dimensions to your object. If you click down here, and it's right here on the left, the reassociate command. Pick the command. Now you select your object. You specify where you want your first dimension line to go to, and then you specify your second, and there you go. And now this dimension has been reassociated to an object. Dimensions don't always label your objects the way you need them to. Leaders give you a tool to annotate callouts or labels to your objects. Let's open up the dimension example file. We see here in the Styles and in the Dimension tab several different dimension types. Our angle, our align dimensions, horizontal, vertical, and our radius. But sometimes you need to call things out with a certain annotation, with a leader, point to it, and have a text, some sort of note. It could be one word, 2 words, an entire sentence, or a series of notes. You use the leader command. Now, multi-leaders have essentially replaced leaders, but I wanted to show them to you in case you run into them. We'll talk about multi-leaders more in the next section, but a leader is controlled style-wise by the dimension style. So if we open it up, your settings here will control all of your leaders, just the way they do with regular dimensions. Now, you can't access the leader command from the ribbon anymore because Autodesk wants you to use the multi-leaders. That's okay. To get to it, you just type in leader. A leader is very simple. You pick a point, and that starts the leader. As you see, it has an arrowhead and then a line. You click another point, and that's where the tail starts. Click another point again, and you can keep going. Press Enter. Now type in some text. Press Enter again, and there you go. That's a leader. Now you can grab it. You can grip edit it. You can do a lot of different things to it. Now your line here will follow your text. So if I move the text in any way, this line will follow. Leaders are pretty simple. You can double click on the text to edit it, just like regular text. You can do some things with it. Some things. Multi-leaders are much better. but you're going to run into old drawings or old files that are still using leaders. So I wanted to show them to you. So don't worry if they don't work like a multi-leader does. And I don't even recommend using a leader anymore. Always use a multi-leader, but you need to be aware of them because you're going to run into them. Multi-leaders are leaders that have more controls over their display settings and features than the regular leader that we used to use all the time. Let's open up the annotation drawing file. To draw a multi-leader, go to the Annotate tab, then go to the Leaders panel. Click here to start the multi-leader command. Or on the command line, you can type mleader, M-L-E-A-D-E-R, or you can just type in MLD for the command shortcut alias. To draw your multi-leader, just do it like you would a regular leader or some dimension. Pick a point for your arrowhead to start from, and that can be from anywhere in your file. And you can see here, your arrowhead shows up, and if you're too close, then the arrowhead will go away automatically. But as soon as there's enough room, the arrowhead will pop up. So you pick your first point, you pick your second point, and that's where the tail starts. And now you have a text box right here. Just type in whatever you want to be in there. When you're done, just click somewhere outside. And there's your leader. Multi-leaders are great because they're very easy to use, very easy to edit, and you can do a lot of things with them. If you select the multi-leader, you have several grips. This grip here will just change where your arrowhead is. And as it repositions, it'll automatically flip to the other side of your text if necessary. Regular leaders can't do that. So this makes editing much easier. Now to edit the text, just double click it and you have access to it. And it works just like regular text. You can see up here you have access to all of your different text styles, and you get a little preview of what it's going to look like if you make the change. You can change your justification, and again, you get a preview of what it's going to look like. Now there's a lot more to multi-leaders than just this simple leader with text, and it's easy to edit. We have a few more grips. If I grab this one, I can reposition wherever it goes. And watch, if I bring it over here, the leader flips to the other side. That's very handy. Just like with other grips and grip editing, if I hover over that grip, don't pick it yet, I get some options. I get the stretch command, which is what it defaults to, or I can lengthen it. So I can lengthen the landing, or I can add another leader. Thus the term multi-leader. Now this is going to be a real ugly leader, but I wanted to demonstrate to you how easy it is to do. And this side has the exact same features as well. I can also change the length right here. That'll scoot it in. And you can see as I grip edited the length of the landing here, made it shorter, this landing stayed the same size. It's just that it came in relative to the text. I can move the text by clicking in the top left here. If I had a paragraph, I could add more space to it, or I can close it all the way up. You can do the same thing inside the text editor itself. So you can do a lot of things with grips. Make sure your O snaps are off, otherwise it's going to snap right to a spot. But this can control spaces between your landings and between your text. And if I move the position of my text again, everything else goes along with it. I can stretch it all the way over here, and all the leaders will even come now to the same landing. It's all automatic. Now that's really cool. Now if you want to take away one of these leaders, just select the multi-leader object, right-click, And you get a lot of other commands. Some of the same ones, erase, move, copy, select, etc. But you can also add a leader or remove a leader. Pick remove a leader, then specify which leaders you want to remove. Press enter, and they're gone. If you right-click again, you can change the multi-leader style. And again, you can save it as a new multi-leader style. And again, you have the rest of your right-click shortcut menu special tools. The real power in IMLeaders or multi-leaders lies within their styles. So let's open up the multi-leader style manager. You get to that right here. It works just like the dimension styles we've seen before. Right now in this file there are three: an annotative, an architectural, and a standard. We were using the architectural style, so we'll take a look at that. If you want to make a new one, just click New. If you want to modify the one that you're working on, click Modify. There are three tabs. One's for the leader format, and this gives you a type. You can have a straight line, as we're using here. You can use a spline, and that will curve the line work, making it nice and fancy, giving it a bit of a hand-drawn look. Or you can turn the leader off altogether. It's up to you and what you need. You have your color, line type, line weight, your arrowhead, same settings, the size, and then the leader break. The leader break is just where it goes between the end of the leader and the text. Now you have your leader structure. You can set a maximum number of leader points. So I can keep clicking if I need this line to just wiggle or jiggle or meander around my drawing. But typically 2 points is enough. I can set the first segment at a specific angle and make the second segment at a specific angle. Let's take a look. So if I make a new one, just click anywhere. You can see how it's snapping to specific angles. Well, that's nice because it makes your drawing look more uniform. So that's a nice feature to have. Since we only really have one segment, the second segment angle isn't really being applied. But you can turn that off if you want. Now the content is really cool because you can do a lot of powerful things here with your multi-leaders. Now your first option that you have is in the multi-leader type. Here you pick what type, of course, of multi-leader it's going to be. You can have text, a block, or none. So your text you've seen, it just puts text that you can edit and change and do whatever you want to with, essentially, at the end of your leader tail. But a block gives you a little symbol, and you can put in text in there or any other information that you want. And it comes default with several different types of callouts. You have the detail callout, a slot callout, a circle, a box, hexagon, triangle, etc. So let's go with the detail callout. Now the attachment can go in at an insertion point of the block or at the center of the extents. So that means it's just going to center it right here, or it's going to put it at wherever the insertion point for the block is. And a lot of times those are the exact same thing. You can adjust your scale and your color here as well. So click OK, click Close, and let's create one. Now we get a call out. Now we can give it information inside these circles. You could say 1 and then 2. These can be anything you want. Now to edit this, double click it, and this brings up the Edit Attributes box. These are attributed blocks that it's using here in the multi-leader. And now I can change this to whatever I want. Click OK. And there you go. Now that's great for a lot of different specific types of callouts. You could say door number 1, or if it's plant red or plant blue, or if you have some sort of bill of material or other schedule of materials that you need, you can do that here. Or if you want to call out a specific section or detail view from a drawing and then tell everyone what sheet it's on. So this could be, view A on sheet 5. I sort of missed over a couple of things here that I want to show you. Here in the leaders panel, you have some options. There's only one type of multi-leader command. It just the multi-leader command. And what it does will depend on whichever style you're using. And then from here, you have a couple of different really cool features. You can add a leader, as we saw how to right-click on it, remove a leader, or here you can align some things. This aligns them according to space. So if you select it and you pick your multi-leaders, press enter, then you pick the multi-leader you want to align to, and it kind of locks it in. So this will align your different multi-leader types together. Let me show you with two text objects. You pick the one you want to line up to, and there you go. It helps them to look a little better. Now sometimes you need to combine the different callouts. So you select the collect command. Well, this one only works, as you see, with multi-leaders that have the blocks set to them. So let's make another one. It can go anywhere, and it can say anything, except we don't have the proper style set up. Let's go to the architectural, that's the one we changed, and make another call out. Put anything in it, it doesn't matter at this point. Pick the collect command, select one, and then two, press enter, and there you go. It will add them together. So make sure you know which way you want it to go, and also realize that they won't go together. It just sort of lines them up. So be careful with that. But it's a quick way to combine things together if you have multiple callouts to the same or similar spot. So just keep an eye on it. But those are multi-leaders. They can do a lot of different things. They can use text, they can use blocks, you can have more than one leader. They're very easy and quick to edit. The other main form of annotation in AutoCAD is text. Text is used to label objects, to put in notes, title blocks, and a lot of other different instances throughout your drawings. There are two main forms of text: single-line text and multi-line text. Multi-line text has mostly replaced the use of single-line text, but there are still places where single-line text may be better. To create single-line text, type in the word dtext. Pick a starting point for your text, define a height, just type in the number, enter in your rotation angle, which will typically be 0, and then start typing. When you're finished, press enter. Now it looks like it's going down to a second line. Press enter again, and it keeps going. Finally, you might want to press escape to get out of it. But when you pick one of these objects, you'll see it's single-lined and it's one object. This is a second object. You can also start the single-line text by going up to the Annotate tab in the ribbon, going to the Text panel, click the flyout, and go single-line text. And it works the same way. Now I can type in my height, I can put in my angle, and now if you hold the Control key down and press enter, that will get you right out of the text editor. And there you go. When you select one of these objects and the Properties palette is open, you have controls over what you see here. You have your typical color, layer, line type, etc. Your 3D visualization if you're in AutoCAD, not AutoCAD LT. And then the contents. I can edit the contents right here. See, I just changed this. You can change the text style, and that works just like a dimension style or a leader style, etc. You can change the justification. Change the height, the rotation, and everything else. I can even change the obliquing. That makes it italicized. Change my alignment, my positions, make it backwards. You can even make it upside down. Just in case your drawing is upside down and backwards, you can do that. So there are a lot of different things you can do with single line text. Something you can't do is have more than one line, obviously. And you don't have all of the fancy text editing features that are in multi-line text. We'll look at some of those later. To edit the text, again, just like anything else, you double click it, and there you go. Everything's highlighted in here. You can pick where you want your cursor to be, and that's where you're going to type. So you can just start typing away or edit it, etc. That's single line text. The nice thing about single line text is when you edit the text for whatever reason, and you just type something in, you hit enter, and you're right out. It's real easy to do. That's one benefit to single line text. So if you put it in a sort of table-like list, it makes it easy to edit each individual one. And you can move the text to put it exactly where you want it to be, to line that up, and to go. So that part is real easy to do. But of course, you can do a lot of that with multi-line text too, and we'll get into that here real soon. Multi-line text, or M-text, can produce notes, callouts, descriptions, or most any other form of annotation. Just type M-text on the command line to start the command. You can also type in MT, and if you type in text, you get single line text. So don't type that one in. That's something that happens sometimes, so just be careful. You can also go up to the Annotate tab on the ribbon, to the text panel, and click on the multi-line text command. And there you go. You'll see that little ABC prompt, and that will tell you where your text is going to go, and it will look like your style that you have current. So if I were to type in ABC, that's what it's going to look like. When entering text, you specify opposite corners of a text bounding box. That defines the width of the paragraphs in the multi-line text object. The length of the multi-line text objects depends on the amount of text, not the length of the bounding box. So you can use grips to edit that later. So let me show you here. I'll click something, and this is the area in which it's going to work. If you run out of room, it'll just keep going down the screen. That's okay. But it will be constrained to use this width. If a word can't fit in there, it'll wrap it down to below. So let me demonstrate. Now, when you're finished writing in your text, you can just click somewhere outside of that window, and there you go. So that's text. It works just like, or extremely close to, a word processing software program. Most of the characteristics of multi-line text are controlled by the text style, which sets the default font and some other options, such as line spacing, justification, etc. You can use the current text style, or you can select a new one right here in the ribbon. This file only has these two, but of course you can always make a new one by clicking here or typing in style. Within the multi-line text object, you can override the current text style. So if I double click it, I can make changes here. So if I click with my left mouse button, hold, and then drag it across to highlight the text, I can come right up here and I can change some things. I can make it bold, italicized, underline, overline, strike through. I can make it all lowercase. I can make it all uppercase. And I can change the font right here. Let's go to something very different. I can even change the color of it right here as well. So that's pretty cool. You can do a lot of things right there, and you can't do these types of things to this degree with single line text. Now, I recommend that you try not to do this type of thing, because what happens now is once you put in those overrides, you can't use a match properties to fix the text or to change the style. It just holds on to it. So be careful with that. If you need your text to look different, create another style that fits your display settings that you want to use, and then apply that style to that bit of text. Now you can make multiple multi-line text objects, and you can have a header or a title type of a style, and then a regular notes type of a style. I suggest doing that. But sometimes it's not really practical, and it doesn't really matter if you're going to have to, match styles or not. But try to refrain from that if possible. When you select the text object and you look at the properties palette, you can change a lot of the different properties of that object. Of course, you have your general settings again, your color, your layer. So we can change the color here to green, the layer, the line type, etc. There are also other options in the properties palette that are unique to multi-line text. You have the style that you can change. You can edit the contents right here. If you click on the ellipsis, it will open up the text object itself, allowing you to edit it right here. If you see all this code right here, the /FBEL-MT, that's the font. You can set up the font and everything right in here if you'd like, but that's doing it the hard way. You can change the justification. And with multi-line text, you can really see how the justification is affected. On a single line text, it's not as noticeable. But as I move over each of these, I get a little preview of what's going to show up and how it's going to look. I can change the text height. I can match the orientation to another object. I can rotate it. I can change the line spacing distance, etc. Now, the background mask is pretty cool. Right now it's set to no. If I click on the ellipsis, it gives me different options. I can click here to use background mask. Now I can use the background color, meaning when I print this out, it will put a white box behind the text, or match the paper size. In other words, it will not print in that area except for the text. And that way, if there's line work beneath or underneath or behind the text, that line work won't show up, making your text much more visible. Now I can use a drawing background color, or I can pick any color that you want to use. Now here you have to set that border. Now right now it's set to 0. And this is going to specify sort of a scaled version of where that border is going to go. If I type in 1, then it will fill up 100%, or a scale of 1:1 of my text area. Let me click OK. So you can see I have a magenta background to my text, and it fills up 1. If I select the text again and go back to that, click the ellipsis, and if I change this to, let's say 2, it'll now go out 2 units past. So it gets kind of tricky on exactly how that works, but if you want to fill up just the text, you set it to 1. If you want it to go a little bit past, it needs to be higher than 1, and that will be measured in units. Now, as I edit this text, and if I put my rotation back to 0, that will help us see it a little better. My box fills even more. And so it will keep matching it. And that allows you to create a lot of different types of highlighted notes. Now, if you're printing in color, that will print out a magenta color behind your text. If you're just printing in black and white, it will be some shade of gray or whatever line thickness that your magenta color is set to. When you double click on the text, you have some text editing abilities, and we've looked at most of them. And a lot of the things that you have here are available in the properties palette. Your line spacing, your justification, all of your colors, bold, etc. You can insert some symbols here, degrees, plus, minus, and a lot of others. You can set up columns. Now, the columns are pretty cool. So there you go. If you have a lot of notes, you can have just one object and you can put them in multiple columns. Double click that and you edit it by pulling this arrow down or up. And you can change the width of your columns right here just by clicking and holding it. And eventually it gets wide enough where it can hold everything. And this will change their separation. And that's controlled here. I put it on the dynamic columns and a manual height. That means I can manually, or will have to manually, adjust their height and width. Now if I go to auto height, that means as I type, it will automatically fill in the area for me. And that you have to define. Or I can say no, and it will put it all into one column. You can also create static columns. Say, hey, I want it to be in 5 columns, and then just work it out however it needs to be. But if you don't have enough text, then you're going to have an empty space. So there's a lot that you can do with multi-line text. There are a lot of different settings that can help you with your notes. It's very powerful. It's very word processor-like. So if you've used the word processor for a lot of different things, you'll be able to use multi-line text. And if there's something you want to do, just think about, well, how would I do it in a word processor? And you're probably going to be able to do it the exact same way right here in AutoCAD.